Welcome to another episode of Best Ball Bros, where we're here to celebrate with the mock draft champion of the world, NFL wizard, Josh Norris. Hope everybody brought some bubbly to enjoy this. I guess this is almost like a happy hour. We're celebrating Josh Norris. Don't look at his mock draft from this year. Look at last year. We're celebrating Josh Norris and maybe getting to know Josh a little bit better today. Best Ball Bros, let's have some fun. There it is.
Bro.
This is I saved this background for anybody watching on YouTube. We got this is Josh grinding the tape.
Someone made a hilarious comment that it looks like I'm drinking a carton of chicken stock. Cheers.
It does. It kind of does. But yeah, this is such a good. This makes me feel like I'm in the room with you. Like, I guess it's kind of awkward because I see you on my screen and behind me. But so first question before we get into anything, the thing that I ask every single person on this show: in your fantasy sports career, what is the absolute worst player take you've had? Someone you've recommended to the people, even if it was a long time ago. Yeah. What's the worst take?
I mean, if I can link draft stuff to fantasy stuff, is that okay?
Yeah, run. Whatever works.
There's a lot of them. I had Akeem Butler as wide receiver 1 that year.
Oh, baby. That's a good one. I like that one.
I think I might have had Josh Rosen as quarterback 1 in his class too.
Oof.
And that was, Lamar. That was Josh Allen. That was Baker and Sam. In fact, that draft season I was on, it's one of my few appearances on Good Morning Football, and they haven't asked me back since. So I wouldn't either if I was them.
Was Kay on the show back then?
Yeah.
So
Kay and I have a long history.
Kay's the St. Louis gal.
Yes,
I don't know her. I don't know her personally, but my wife, through a friend, knows Kay.
So my start at NBC, first I was a freelancer, and I was working, ungodly hours because I turned their college football section into an NFL draft section, and was really a one-man band doing all the news and all the write-ups and all that type of stuff for Rotoworld. And just, again, working just crazy hours. And then at the time, my manager found my reel from college at Elon. And they had just opened these massive new studios in Stamford, Connecticut. And they're like, we don't have any digital video. Why don't you come up here and start doing that? And the digital host was Kay Adams. So Kay and I, for a year and a half, would do a video once a week in those studios. And Eric, can I curse on the show?
Absolutely.
I was so fucking bad. I mean, so bad. And part of me wishes that those videos were still in existence.
Yeah.
But I'm so glad that they're not. Maybe it was in Kay's contract that they got deleted.
Yeah, Kay probably got them deleted. They wouldn't be gone if it weren't for her, probably, with where she is now.
So bad. It was to the point, because when you start doing on-camera stuff, at least in a studio and television and all that jazz, you want to write a script in your head and memorize it word for word and repeat it over and over. And so I was a robot, Yeah. Yep. And so I would just not listen to what she was saying, have this thing in my head, go on for a minute and throw it back to her. And she's the absolute best at, making things fun, making things light, and also being able to have a conversation with anyone just about anything. And so she didn't have a really good relationship, but man, I wish I was good back then, because I think my career would be a little bit different during my final years at NBC. Let's put it that way. If I wasn't completely face planting at 24 years old when they put me on camera for the first time.
I mean, I can't imagine honestly what that was like, because literally not that many years ago. So I'm 33. Not that many years
Same.
ago, I was just starting to do like streams like this, sitting in my
Yeah.
office at my desk. And I mean, I don't even think I'm good now, but then it was like you said, you're like practicing things.
I
You
had no
like
idea.
you have absolutely no idea, and you come to realize that, like, eventually is like none of that shit matters. Just talk and have fun, and like,
Right.
right. That's the important part. But I was so lost doing it, just like I said, just sitting here, like doing a Roto Grinders like stream or whatever, right, live show or whatever. So clueless, so nervous, was so bad that I can't fathom that, like at the level that you were doing it at, in a studio, NBC, right? That's like that on steroids.
The point where I figured out that I could finally be comfortable on camera was, well, in that same year, they put me on live television. So I went in, and that was back in the days of Pro Football Talk on afternoon shows. And it was hosted by Eric Casillas, Mike Florio, and Sean King, the old Bucks quarterback.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah, this was way back. Back.
These are my days. This is my favorite time. Those days. Yeah.
I'm the same age as you, by the way. We're the exact same age. And they brought me in because I was just doing, just grinding draft prospects, and I worked in the office and all that type of stuff. And they take me in for an audition, and I do like one segment, and it's awful. So bad. It's awful. I do the exact same thing. And the next day they're like, oh, we're going to put you on live television. And it was only at times, sometimes literally I'd step on camera for a minute, and that was it. Like I remember when Vic Beasley was going through his pro days and all that stuff, come on and be like, oh, he did this, this, and this, and this is his projection. And then I just walk off, and then that was it. But to answer the question I posed for myself here, I was so nervous again to repeat exactly what I had like prepared and like the points I wanted to make that I thought were well thought out, that there was one time when I just forgot what I was going to say. And it felt like there was going to be a huge 5-second pause, and that it was just going to bomb. And then I went back and realized that 5-second pause and then starting up again was just really natural. And it's what we all do in like normal conversation. Right.
Right.
And so like just listening to someone else, because you do all the work anyways, just listening to someone else and then responding to what they say. That's what's natural. That's what wins in television. And it's not just, these pre-rehearsed monologues that I'm known to give, but pre-rehearsed monologues that people do on television. So
yeah, it's so funny. It's so funny you say that, because it took me so long to figure that part out, to just like, eventually they just started putting me on shows with people that were way, way, way better at that than I was. Like, I don't know if you play DFS, but like Head Chopper, one of the DFS like legends or whatever. He's really smart. He's won multiple millions of dollars in DFS, but he like will play the host role because he's so incredibly good at sitting and listening to people and creating that conversation. The hosting thing, he also obviously is very good at DFS. And eventually you just start to pick up like, it's me and Head Chopper hanging out for a half hour. Right, is what it becomes. And that's what all this has become. I mean, selfishly, that's why I'm having this show, because I get to just hang out with, people like you for 45 minutes to an hour once a week. But then, I don't know if you went through this. Then it was when I started the Spike Week stuff. It was just me.
Yeah.
All solo streams. Anything that was pre-recorded was all me solo pre-recording it. The amount of time I wasted doing that thing that you talked about, going through my head of like, okay, here's this well thought out thing, right? First video I did was about Trey Lance and the 49ers. So really, you want to talk about reels and bad reels. The first best ball video I ever did was touting a guy who didn't play in his first season. But I probably recorded that thing like 7 or 8 times, because you just screw up and you think you have this picture of perfection in your head, and it's only you, so you don't even know if it sounds good. That whole thing about this space is like, it's a lot harder than people think. You can't just like show up and be good at it. Like I said, I don't even think I'm good at it now. But I mean, when I first started, it was useless me being on the air.
It helped me a lot doing that in college. I was doing like a ton of student media stuff. We showed them on the end of our NFL draft stream, which was pretty hilarious. We got some good comments off those. And like the first 5 things that you do absolutely suck. The 10th one is awful. The 15th one is bad. But like you just get better from each one, and like you learn like what feels good and what works and what doesn't. And it's all through trial and error. That's the entire thing. So yeah, my first professional podcast, quote unquote, was something called, shout out to anyone in the chat that might know this, Process the Process. And this was like just a
don't
solo
know.
journey. I mean,
Okay.
this was pre-serial, like when you think of podcasts, it's like NPR
Wow.
serial, then everything
Yeah.
after that. And this was before. And it was very NPR style, to be honest with you, because I was listening to a lot of NPR shows because, I was just a well-educated 26-year-old.
Yeah.
And but yeah, that was just all individual stuff. I mean, I'd have interviews and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, even the podcast thing, that's to me really a good way of getting into all of this. Maybe not now because everyone has a podcast, but back then, because you could just do it yourself, like even 7 years ago, you'd have to have a studio to do online video, basically. Like there was no real easy way of doing that. Now you have phones, you can do StreamYard on phones, anything like that. But we all can edit audio. It takes just a little bit of time to learn, and there's a microphone everywhere, right? And so just going from that to doing all this stuff now, it's pretty amazing how quickly it grows. And I was even talking to a college class last week, and I've graduated 11 years ago. I mean, my final year in college, we were still digesting everything that we shot on camera through physical tapes. Like the actual rolls and everything. And that was a decade ago. And now they can do literally every single thing they want to do just with their cell phone. It's pretty crazy.
It was legendary, game-changing technology when I was in college. The software Huddle, HUDL.
Yeah.
That came out when I was in college. And it was like, that's what everyone was making the move to. Before that, it would literally, when I was in high school, we'd show up to Saturday mornings after we played high school football on Friday nights. We show up Saturday mornings, and the coach would roll in with the VHS and roll the AV set. And like, I'm like, this was I graduated. We graduated in 2006. I'm not. It's not. We're talking about the 80s. This is still in the 2000s, and we're rolling out the frickin' tube TV on the cart to watch film and stuff.
Wasn't it the greatest thing though? Like when you had a substitute teacher and they just pull in the big monitor on the rolling thing, and then also the overhead projectors. I was going to coaching clinics, back in 2015, and those coaches are so old school that they were still using the overhead projectors and putting them up on the wall and using the markers and all that type of stuff. So some things never change.
Like the translucent sheets of paper or whatever that you yes. Oh man, yeah, those are the good old days. My dad, lifelong high school football coach. That's how I got into football when I was really little. So yeah, I've been to all of those. Yeah, all the same chalk. He wrote on the chalkboard when I was in high school. He coached me, and he would get into halftime and he'd write in chalk on the chalkboard. And like, if you talk to a kid nowadays, what is chalk? I don't even know what that what that means. So it's funny. It's so funny those days. But I feel like it shaped me for sure. But almost this like whole industry, we all come from like kind of that.
Yeah.
That generation, you know what I mean? And it's like a foundation of, we do still know what it's like we like to make fun of, the old football bros and stuff, but we do still kind of know what it's like before like this game and technology and everything totally transformed.
I remember a group of now online friends, and I've met some of them in real life, but I think they came from a message board called like Football Future or Football's Future or something like that. But it was like the Eric Stoners, the Andrew Parsons, the Matt Harmon. Matt Harmon was in that group. Charles was in that group. Justice, all that stuff. And so it is pretty amazing to see so many of us, cultivate an actual career in sports stuff. So online friends are like a real thing, aren't they, Eric? Like I try to explain, I don't have real life friends. I know, to like normal people, well-adjusted people who. I'm like, oh yeah, my friend. They're like, oh, when have you met? Never.
Literally never.
I've spoken to them for 7 years and never met them. But that's like, to me, what the Senior Bowl and the Combine and all this stuff is good for, is meeting online friends and see if you actually, kick it in real life. So
yeah, I'm excited for anybody that is listening. I'm hoping to kind of start doing a little of in-person type events and stuff around this space. I mean, we'll get into the best ball stuff later. I promise. You guys get to hear us talk about that every day of the week. So like I said, we'll get into more of that. But I mean, with the contests and everything and the community that's going on around best ball and fantasy football, obviously, it's so crazy. But like you said, we don't have any of that in-person element.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that I want to try to tackle a little bit too. I don't know about
But
this
maybe
summer.
not like the
We'll see.
Playboy Mansion. Maybe not the
Yeah.
Playboy Mansion.
Yeah, we don't have to go full DFS bro with this. Yeah, Playboy Mansion live finals and all that. I think that's a little excessive. Also,
a little outdated, I think.
Also, if anyone has ever been to any of these live finals, there could not be a worse place to put a 200 loser nerds who never leave their computer. Like I've been lucky enough to make quite a few live finals, and I love a lot of these guys that I've met there. There's tons of awesome people, but like, it's not exactly like the social skills are not, we're not like crushing it in terms of those people. And I don't imagine that best ball is really that much different. Like we get enjoyment out of drafting fantasy football teams on May 2nd,
right?
So before we get into some of that best ball and fantasy football stuff, how did you get from the days of starting your own kind of podcast, the days of grinding the college football stuff for NBC, a little bit of media, into the Rotoworld gig and kind of what started to really become your career?
I've told this story before, so I apologize to people who've already heard it. But going into my senior year, I interned with the then St. Louis Rams in their scouting department. It was kind of like a Truman Show moment where I already had an internship lined up with Fox Sports Radio in Los Angeles. And it was just like one that I randomly applied to in this bank of internships. And I was going there to basically cut the audio that they would use in like their 1 minute sports updates at the top of every hour. Riveting stuff. Eric. But I was walking like just around campus the day after, school ended. And I got this email that said, this is an internship only for Elon students. There's an opening in the scouting department for the Rams, and apply it. And it was just a mass email. And I was like, who the heck is more qualified than me for this? Because that's all I'd been doing for like student media stuff and on my own and making mock and all that jazz, And so I got it. And so I showed up to Earth City, Missouri at the start of training camp. This was Sam Bradford's rookie year.
I was probably there when you were there.
There you go.
At that time, I went out to Earth City a lot back then.
James Laurinaitis. It was Jason Smith's second season.
I was there. I'm sorry to interrupt. I was there. So I was a diehard St. Louis Rams fan. Like absolute. Yeah, it was awful. I'm glad you're bringing this up again for me to relive it. But they obviously have the greatest show on turf, which was like 3 of the greatest years of my football life. And then it seems like it's turning around with Bradford, right? Get number 1 overall pick, you get Sam Bradford. Draft, which was obviously a stone disaster.
AJ Feely was the starter too, but Bradford just outplayed him in training camp.
Correct. Don't get me into sleeves. Sammy Sleeves is Bradford. That's where Kirk Cousins learned.
Who was so it was Danny Amendola, something Gibson was the other wide receiver.
Oh my gosh. Yes. How am I going to forget those days of they were like last year's Detroit Lions of best ball. Right. Where like it would like,
and it was Steven Jackson in the backfield, but I don't remember who the other.
Steven Jackson was a first round pick in fantasy, and no one drafted any of the wide receivers. That's how bad the offense was.
It was real bad.
It was so bad. I'm gonna forget. So my favorite time was favorite. I guess could be phrased different ways, but it was so bad, right? The wide receiver room was so bad that they mortgaged the future for Tavon to move up to draft Tavon Austin, right? Like how much will we laugh if somebody mortgaged the future? Brandon Gibson. Oh my God.
I can buy you his rookie card if you want right now.
I think I'll pass. Thank you though. It'd just be a reminder of a miserable like 10 years of my life. And this dude was getting targeted.
Oh yeah, heavily
by the Rams. But anyway, what I was going to just so you can get back to it, Jason Smith. The Jason Smith thing is one of the craziest in practice. His first practice. So I used to go to open training camp and stuff. His first, which is a shithole, by the way, Earth City.
I lived across the street in a hotel that just had what was the pizza chain that just only had like square slices.
Yes.
And that was it. It was a gas station and that pizza place.
Yes,
and
there's a Moto Mart.
Before Uber or Uber Eats or DoorDash or any of that stuff. And so I basically just ate pizza and whatever they served at the training camp facility for the entire summer and gained 20 pounds. Not joking.
Yeah. I'm sure that you do. That's if anybody ever gets a chance to come through, which that actually used to get fairly popular going to the training camp. But Earth City is basically some corporate buildings, which is what the Rams facility was. A couple of gas stations, yeah, and I think that there's 2 restaurants. I think there's a McDonald's and that. So anyway, really high quality stuff for the Rams. They draft Jason Smith, right? Things are turning around. We got the franchise left tackle, got Bradford, like you said, got Laurinaitis at the top of the second round. Everybody's excited. I go to practice on the first day. Everybody else is running like team drills. The offensive line coach is working with Jason Smith on how to get into a 3-point stance.
Coming out of Baylor.
Because he played at Baylor and they obviously ran, this is old school Baylor, not new school Baylor. Like the Corey Coleman days of Baylor. And he couldn't put his hand in the dirt. He's supposed to be the franchise left tackle.
I'll tell you this,
second overall, and he couldn't put his hand down.
One of the first things I was told was that they immediately knew that first year that Jason Smith could not play left tackle after being the number 2 overall pick. And so they took Roger Saffold at the start of the second round the year after to play left tackle, then moved Jason Smith out to the right side. Anyways, so what I did with the Rams just quickly was with them during training camp. One of my main jobs was to pick up players that were coming in for tryouts or workouts or veterans or undrafted guys and all that type of stuff. And then that also meant, when they got cut, taking them to the airport immediately. And so I was just driving the van. And some names that rolled through, Justin Fargas came in for
running back. Yep.
No one knew about. He came through. Denario Alexander, that.
Oh
name.
yeah. Well,
Alexander.
He played on the team before the knee finally gave out.
Yep. And there were a bunch more.
He was good. Denario Alexander was a good player.
Yep. And so, spent training camp with them. Then went back to Elon for my final year. And then they asked me back to the 2011 NFL draft. So that was at the lockout. And it was the crazy one. Cam Newton at the top, Von Miller, keep going on and on, JJ Watt, Allen Smith, and all those quarterbacks. And so I sat in their draft room for all 7 rounds. And by that point, I knew I wanted to work in sports in some capacity. And so I had this like information in the back of my head after working there, for a summer, that I just started to spout off to people who I like read their work. And one of them was Evan Silva. And so Evan kind of caught on that I had a bit more information and why. And so he and I kind of started up a relationship that way, just communicating DMs, texts, all that type of stuff. And so then when I went back, this is really bad. They're never going to hire me, so it's okay. When I went back for the 2011 NFL draft, I was like, I'm going to tell Evan Silva they're bored. And so what I did was when I got there, checked out the board because they pulled down where it actually was. And it was only about like an hour ahead of the draft. Went to the bathroom and just like told Evan, hey man, this is the top 15. And then like because that was the first year too, it was 3 days, I believe. Yep. And so I told them like, hey, they'll settle for, oh God, who was the defensive tackle? Corey Leggett or Prince Amukamara.
Yeah.
Right. People wanted them to get Julio, but the Falcons had traded up for Julio in that point. And then it got to the pick, and it was Robert Quinn, which was a really good selection. But Robert Quinn had like a tumor when he was in college or high school or something, and so teams are really nervous about that. And so I just picked up a lot of things. My main job was just to move the magnets. So like when a player got drafted, moved him from the front board over to the team in the backboard. And that was my whole thing. That was it. Shut up and move the magnets. But you pick up a lot of things along the way. And like Josh McDaniels was also the OC. That was his 1 year as being the OC for that team.
I couldn't remember when it was. I was going to ask you about the coaches. Yeah.
Yeah. And Steve Spagnuolo was the head coach. And so we're getting there in day 2 and it's late, And so all morning they're like, okay, we know Josh McDaniels wants a receiving tight end to pair with the legend, Michael Ho-Ho Manawanui. And he wants to run 2 tight ends because, it worked so well with New England. He tried it in Denver and now he's here. And so everyone thought that would be like the 3rd round selection. So we were looking at names like DJ Williams, if you remember that name, coming out of Arkansas.
I do.
Lance Kendricks coming out of Wisconsin, a few others. Luke Stocker was another one. And but in the 2nd round, they were probably going to take a running back because Steven Jackson's time, I think, either was ending or was about to end. And if you're looking this up right now, I'm not missing names. Just let me know.
I am. You're good.
I'm
fact checking the shit out of you, though.
Right. Some of the running backs up there, I can't believe I remember these. Mikel Ashore, Daniel Thomas, Kendall Hunter.
Oh my gosh.
All those names. I mean, blast from the past. I thought Kendall Hunter was going to be a player. So
everybody here wanted Mikel Ashore because
right.
if anybody's not familiar, in St. Louis is located like basically right in the middle of the University of Illinois and the University of Missouri. Everybody is either a Missouri fan or an Illinois fan. And St. Louis is right on the river. It's literally on the river between Illinois and Missouri. So it's basically a conglomerate of both. I actually live in Illinois. I say I'm from St. Louis, but I live on the suburbs of Illinois. And so Mikel Ashore, there's always these guys like Mikel Ashore. Like, he went to Illinois. Oh my God, we need a running back in the second round. It has to be Mikel Ashore. You know, that's the sports talk radio.
I'm even trying to pull up who they wanted. Anyways, they get to their pick. Yeah, here it is. They get to their pick in round 2. It's the 47th overall selection. And at least they're dynamic. Every team is different. Coaches start to like trickle in about 3 to 5 picks ahead of time. They're kind of like in their own stations around the draft room, and in the draft room are the scouts and, you know, executives and all that type of stuff. And so the coaches start to trickle in, and then like right when the pick is about to be on the clock, Josh McDaniels just like stares at Billy Devaney, who's the general manager. And then Billy turns the room and says, "We're going to take Lance Kendricks." And Lance Kendricks isn't even close to the top of the board, man. Like, not even close. And the director of college scouting, I think at the time, or maybe he was like the head scout, one of the lead scouts, let's put him that way, was like, "Are you fucking kidding me?" They wanted, and this guy's a bust too, but they wanted Brandon Harris, who was by far the top player on their board. He's the corner coming out of Miami.
Okay.
And so, I mean, again, my first time in there, I'm just like, all these teams are just totally lying about best player available, like completely. And so he obviously wanted to turn Michael Ho'omanawanui and Lance Kendricks into Rob Gronkowski and Aaron Hernandez, and this was his plan. And not even close, right? Not even close.
No, Lance Kendricks was the final in a long line of. There was a run. I as a damaged Rams fan, I went back. I go back through it probably far too much, but I went back through it a couple months ago or something, of their run post. It was actually at the end of the Greatest Show on Turf. It started. They drafted Trung Candidate in the first round when they had Marshall Faulk in his prime on a Super Bowl team, and from then on, they hit on like one of the lowest rates you've ever seen in your entire life. From the year 2000 until basically it started to turn around. Right, you start getting the Larynitises and stuff in, and it started to turn around a little bit. But the Lance Kendricks one was so funny because I was a dumb young kid at that time going to camp and watching him. I was sold. I was like, this dude's awesome. He is Aaron Hernandez because he's lined up on linebackers in 7-on-7. He's cooking these guys up. He looks great in shorts, right? Because he's playing the Aaron Hernandez role, like you said. And I'm like, oh my God, this is it. You're going back home. I think we have a home dynasty league that's been going since I was like 16 years old. Lance Kendricks went at like the end of the first round or something like that. And like, because we're all like, we're leaking the inside information that like this guy's the next superstar tight end. Spoiler alert, Lance Kendricks was useless in the NFL.
And no offense to Lance. It's not his fault,
No.
So let me throw a few more names at you. So that's what happens in round 2. And literally the lead scout is like, "Are you kidding me?"
Who was so Brandon Harris was like the guy. I'm looking at this second round, and this is maybe it's just because this is my generation or whatever, but
it's pretty awful.
The names are hilarious.
Well, Rodney Hudson's pretty good there. A couple picks after. Shane Green at running back was ranked highly.
Remember Titus Young?
I do remember.
Did he
Titus
play? Did he Titus
Young had some problems.
Yeah. Daquan Bowers, did he play? He was he was one of the first guys that blew out his knee, right? And he was supposed to be a stud. Blew out his knee.
10 pick.
Yeah, and he goes in the second round.
Randall Cobb though went 64th overall. Anyways, okay, we wrap up with round 2, and so we're sitting there in round 3, and I actually think this guy is the director of college scouting. His name is Mike Williams is his name. Yeah, and the prior year, I don't know if you remember this name. Maybe the chat does. There was a wide receiver to come out of Syracuse who went in like round 5 or round 6. Also, whose name is like the other Mike Williams.
Other
And
Mike Williams, yep.
he had an unbelievable rookie year. I think it might have been with the Bills. I'm just throwing out stuff.
Yeah, you're good. I'm looking.
And this director of college scouting like pleaded the room to take him. And so on the heels of that guy, probably, and I'm going to throw out numbers, like probably have 60 catches and like 890 yards and maybe 6 touchdowns his rookie year. What did he have?
65 catches for 964 yards and 11 touchdowns.
See, close enough.
129 targets.
Right.
It was on the Bucks. I remember this now.
The Bucks. Okay. So he was unbelievable his rookie year. And so I think the general manager who works with this guy on a daily basis was like, man, we missed on that one. This guy's going to be a star. Let's let Mike Williams, our director of college scouting, pick the wide receiver that he wants most in round 3. And he goes out there and selects Austin freaking Pettis. Yeah. And the reason why he selected Austin Pettis is, this is what he said. He got up on the whiteboard and could tell you what every single player at every single position was supposed to do. Nothing about his game or anything, but just like his intelligence. And I think he had like a great 3-cone or shuttle or something like that. Anyways, so that was awful. And that was the 3rd round. And that was over. Here we go in day 3. So then round 4 rolls around. And between Austin Pettis, the other name at the top of the wide receiver board at that time was Greg Salas.
That's my guy.
All names blast from the past.
Greg Salas was my guy, and I was convinced he was good.
So they debated it hard in that round 3 selection. They get to round 4. Guess who's still on the board?
Shocker.
Greg Salas. Now we know why. But he is like prime slot player or supposed to be, right?
Hawaii. Yeah.
And so you just had, I think Danny Amendola have 100 targets or something, and they didn't think anything of the player, but of Danny Amendola. And so you could see Billy and Steve Spagnuolo getting together and Josh McDaniels and like basically writing the future of Danny Amendola out and being like, hey, if we take Greg Salas, it's over. It's over for him. And then they just took Greg Salas in round 4. And then the most shocking thing, Eric, that has really stood out to me since, we'll just go through some of these. In round 5, some safety out of Ohio State named Jermail Hines. Round 6, they had no selections. And then in round 7, they had picked 216, 228, and 229. And none of these guys hit. Mikael Baker, Jabara Williams, Jonathan Nelson. What stood out to me on that final day is there was no plan. There was no process. Okay. And really, when they got up on the clock, the GM turned to a position coach. He's like, hey, man, who do you want? And they just said a name, and then they picked him. There was no like, hey, this is the critical factors for athletic testing that we think he has upside here, or like blah, blah, blah. It was so random. And no wonder like those guys just completely fizzled out. So that was through 7 rounds of that draft for me.
You're making me sick to my stomach, because as a fan, that's almost what it felt like the drafts were for many a year from the Rams. But everybody gets to listen to us scroll through that. I don't give a shit what anybody thinks. So we had the Bradford year, right? 2010.
Oh, Marty Gilliard.
Marty Gilliard was another one. And so you're so jaded as a young kid in your local market. And like, again, I didn't have access to like tons of really, like right now I go on Twitter, I can find somebody 1,000 times smarter than the content I had access to, in 2009, 2010. I didn't understand who to look for. I didn't understand any of this. So it's like the Rams need a wide receiver. The Rams took Marty Gilliard. I don't know. He looks pretty athletic to me. He was pretty good at Cincinnati. Right? Yeah, he's pretty good at Cincinnati. He's a punt returner, which I do like. I do like those kind of guys, good athletes. Like, well, he's the next great thing, right? There's a line Mike, like you said. Don't worry.
He's the next Oz Hakeem,
Yeah, exactly. Oz Hakeem, the first Rams jersey I ever had. Fendi Onabon.
Oh, they had high hopes for Fendi. He just did not know how to play football. He was a basketball guy.
Yes, great athlete. But you'll see here this tight end run, right? Also, George Selvey, I believe, was the leader in sacks in the country. We also convinced ourselves this 7th round pick, because he had a lot of college sacks, was going to be.
I think he played opposite JPP or close to it around the same time.
And he was like 230 pounds as a defensive end. So anyway, you see this nonsense, right? We'll just scroll through it super quickly. I mean,
Donnie Avery was the other wide receiver. He was pretty good.
Yeah, Donnie Avery was okay. He signed a decent deal with Tennessee Colts. Yep, you're right. Chris Long was a hit, but that's one. So 1 for 8 in that draft.
Oh, Adam Carroll. So this at 2007, this was the general manager prior to Billy. I think if you go back and cross-check all of these names with Senior Bowlers, they're all Senior Bowlers. And that coach, so many of those, the coaches get into the process at the Senior Bowl. That's when they start watching all these players. Yeah. And he just fell in love. He's like, oh man, we're going to take Adam Carricker in round 1. We're going to take Brian Leonard in round 2 because those are the first guys he watched. And he just did not move off of them for the remainder of the process.
Brian Leonard was a fullback at Rutgers who they tried to turn into an NFL running back.
Yeah, he was running mates with Ray Rice, right?
Ray Rice, yeah, he was he was good. He wasn't like a traditional like blocking fullback, right? But like he played as a fullback. I mean, this is 2007, right? 2006 when he was playing, so it's a different style of football. But this is like every year. Find a good player on here. You tell me.
Yeah,
a player who played in the NFL for a long time. Oh, guess what? Another year. OJ Atagwe was pretty good. Richie Incognito.
Anthony in the chat makes a pretty funny comment. I thought Josh might say that they went and turned to him for a 7th round pick. Yeah, man, I would have taken Jason Kelsey in round 6. That's what I would have done. Change the landscape of the NFL for a decade. I actually that week, Eric, that final day of the draft, I had 102-degree fever because it turned out that my wisdom teeth were infected. Like when I got home to Charlotte, I had to get emergency surgery on my wisdom teeth to get them removed. So that final day, my head was spinning. And I didn't tell anyone because I wanted to work at this once in a lifetime opportunity. Right. And so my head was just spinning at 103-degree fever while making all these awful draft picks. So
my favorite, and we'll move on. But this is 1999, they win the Super Bowl, right? Greatest show on turf. They beat Steve McNair and the Titans. If Marshall Faulk, all these guys in their prime, what do you got to do? 1st round running back because he was real fast. Chunk candidate, real fast. Then they move on to the next year, and they have 3 first-round picks despite being one of the best teams in the NFL. Yep. They drafted not 1, but 2 defensive tackles who both were busts, and college linebacker.
Adam Archuleta. Love
Archuleta. Yeah, I'm sure you did, football bro. College linebacker who we got to play NFL safety. They had a tendency for taking these guys playing like fullback and linebacker, and let's put them in the skill groups when they get to the NFL. Spoiler alert: Archuleta couldn't cover my grandma out there. He's a good tackler, but playing safety in the NFL was not great. But I also loved Adam Archuleta.
Oh yeah,
back
I would trade for him in like every single Madden dynasty that I made.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Anyways, so the point of that story, sorry to drag on, but was the relationship that I fostered with Evan. And you can actually go back and find his old tweets suggesting who the Rams are about to pick. Because he's like, oh man, I bet the Rams are going to take Lance Kendricks in round 2 when no one else was mentioning this. You can find these. And it's from me in the bathroom in Earth City, Missouri, texting them to him. Anyway, so the draft ends. I don't have a job out of school. I wanted to work in the league, but again, I like to say at the time it was because of the lockout. Like they weren't hiring anyone. I mean, the league almost like did not play that year.
Yep.
And so the season starts on like a quick turn, and I just start like writing freelance. I started writing freelance for like CBS Sports with Chad Ryder and Rob Rang for draft prospects.
Okay.
And then Evan, once that draft season hit, was like, hey man, why don't you just freelance write for us at Rotoworld for draft stuff? Not to bash, NBC. They don't really pay freelancers. It was like $40 an article. That's what happens in this business.
Yep.
And so I did that. I went to the East West Shrine game, paid for myself down there, did all the Senior Bowl stuff, and then did a good enough job. And Evan was always just such a really good advocate for me. That then I pitched them turning like I said, college football section into the NFL draft section, and we have moved on since then. So
crazy. It's so funny. Had talked to Hayden last week, and he had a not the same story as you, but a very similar story. And I have a similar story as well in terms of getting into this space. I won't tell it because anybody that's listening has probably heard it already. But it was Evan. I was creating a startup in the fantasy sports space and just cold met like with adding Evan on Twitter. It's like, hey, I got this thing. What do you think?
Yep.
He followed me, DM'd me, call me.
Yep.
He just says, call me with his phone number.
Yep.
So what the fuck? I'm like, same thing as you with, you're sick or whatever. This is my once in a lifetime opportunity. I'm like, well, yeah, okay. I'm not prepared for this, but this dude with, several 100,000 Twitter followers just said, hey, call me. So I did. Talked to Evan for the next half hour, 45 minutes. And he helped me launch what, that startup didn't end up working out, but that's why I'm here. That's literally why I'm here today is Evan Silva and him. He had no reason. He likes to joke and be a hardo and stuff on some of these shows and stuff. And he's very funny. He plays that role really well, but he might be one of the nicest, most genuine, caring people like that I've ever met. And definitely in this space, he's like springboarded, like three-fourths of the entire industry has been springboarded by Evan Silva.
And then from there, so I started working at NBC, like I said, and moved over and up to Connecticut, lived there for 8 years. And a big part of that, we talked about television and video, and I was just a writer at first and blurbing and all that type of stuff. And then launched like really the first podcast at NBC. And so they had no idea how to do that stuff. Like NBC is truly a TV network and they do such a good job with it. They do the Olympics, Sunday Night Football. They're so specialized in storytelling in that environment and have perfected it. They didn't know, I'll just talk in past tense here, Eric. They didn't know how to do digital content. Okay. And I think that's normal probably for a lot of these TV networks because the people at the top making decisions are all TV people, right? And I think you have to have a totally different mindset for something that is supposed to be snappy, jump cuts, in your face, and keep you engaged versus I'm going to tune into this on a television network and have this 12-minute long drawn out story about a crazy thing that happened to me. And so, when we still had the #1 podcast when I left there, original, let's put it that way. And that had been for 4 years. And it was a bit frustrating because you looked around and podcasts were being like promoted and like huge numbers and how much they were bringing in and ads and all that type of stuff. And it didn't connect with them in terms of them believing it was like a big priority, but I was super proud of it. And I think it's helped Hayden. I think it's helped Pat. I think it's helped Ray, Daigle, like Ian, everyone that we were able to have the show that we created, had no producer for, that I was editing and putting all this stuff together and turning into video during the pandemic and all that type of stuff. And just being able to have like blurbers, be able to talk on camera and creating content that way, that I'm really, really proud looking back on it, what we were able to do with the podcast stuff over at NBC and Rotoworld. And then I just quit. Eric.
Right. I was really proud of it. And then I just gave him the middle finger and was done with it. No, I'm obviously kidding. But so what, you don't have to give away all any details. I'm not asking you to spill any drama or anything like that. But what made you move to Underdog, or what was the driving force behind that?
And to be honest with you, when I quit, I did not have the Underdog thing lined up. I had nothing.
I knew that. I've heard you say that before. I
had absolutely nothing lined up. It just worked out really well. I'd already planned on Underdog and all that type of stuff, but I quit from, and there's no drama or anything like that, but I quit because when we all went home, I mean, I seriously remember sitting in the office when all of the conference championship games were being canceled due to COVID. Like, I worked in the newsroom and we just surrounded by televisions and they were just all gone and being pulled off the field, like the court and all that type of stuff. And so I thought I'd be home for like a week. Turns out I was home for a year plus. And during that time, again, people were so reliant on making content through the studios and production at NBC that then at that time I just had to learn how to do it myself. So like I found StreamYard because Zoom wasn't as good and started, saying, hey, if we can get this cut from this start point to this end point, and kind of took command of all of the non-written content. Right.
Yep.
And so then when we moved along during those months, once like everyone got accustomed to how working from home and everything was, I basically pitched them on a promotion and just weren't having it. And so I was like, if I didn't show enough in like this last year and a half where we remained, the number one show, and how I'd written out plans to even do more and more and more and get people more and more involved. And I think it's really important because they're really into pitching premium products right now, that premium products have like a name and a face attached to them. And it's not just like, hey, this is a chart that you should look at and live by. Because I think as we evolve with what we're doing with best ball and what we're going to get into in a lot of other places with sports betting and just consuming that content, I think more than anything, people just want to like ride the roller coaster with people, like live, sweat, and because no one's perfect and no one's going to bat 1,000. If you just say like, oh, this is the best information period and here's your winner, I don't know how far that's going to take you anymore. And like more than anything, I think like attaching a person to the information that you're giving across is what's going to win out in the end. So I kept pitching that to them. And at those massive media conglomerates, there's constantly hierarchy changes. And I think I just caught it probably at like the wrong time. And so I kind of just felt like if they weren't going to listen to this proposal that I had, then it was probably just time for me to go. There was nothing left I could prove. So I literally just quit.
That's amazing. I've done something similar like that in the past. So that's funny to hear. I was going to say awesome to hear, but not all those stories work out.
It turned out awesome.
It turned out awesome, but I'm sure like it was for me, it doesn't always feel awesome. No. After you feel really, empowered and invigorated at first. And then if something doesn't literally come together perfectly afterwards, there's a lot of thoughts that come through to your head. But I was just going to add, I basically co-sign everything that you just said. And I think this space that we're both in now is doing a perfect job and might be one of the like shining lights on that model that you're talking about. You just can't be it's a people business. We're in the people business. We're all gambling, right? We're all playing fantasy sports or whatever. But like, it's not fun to just do this all by yourself. Like that's not, the point is that we're all talking, right? You and I are talking. You and Hayden are talking every day. I'm talking to other people. We're in Discords. Maybe you just have a group chat with your buddies. Like best ball really isn't that fun if you didn't talk to anybody about it. You just like sat on your couch and drafted by yourself. Like, I don't know. That doesn't seem that fun to me. But the community experience is a part of it. And like you said, you need kind of a face to be on all of that. We are, of course, at Spike Week going to be launching a premium product, but that's solely driven. That would never have happened if everything over the last year and a half hadn't happened in terms of us being able to create a community, me being able to do a stream every single day, for months or whatever. And so I do think that's really important. And I'm really happy with what we're building here and like seeing what you guys are building and what Peter's building and what tons of other people are building. Cause it's just everybody, we don't directly profit from the same thing, but like we still kind of all do.
Yeah. And I mean, it's pretty amazing also where, let's just use like the betting space has become and like where it's going to. I remember like driving in the car with my dad on Saturdays and listening to the radio, this guy like saying, hey, call this number. It's my lock of the week and all this type of stuff and whatever. And then now I truly feel that all is going to be dictated by just community. And like obviously people are going to try to give out winners because we all want to win and all that type of stuff. But sweating with someone that you find entertaining and informative and who gave you the process of why they came to a selection and all that type of stuff is going to be so much more beneficial than just, information or just a chart that says, oh, here's an inefficiency. Let's bet that one, I think. And I honestly think that networks are still slow to that. Like there's still all that they want is someone to come up there and be like, hey, this is the information, boom. And that's it. So it's all to me intersecting at the right time for all of us to have a really enjoyable experience really for like the next 5-10 years. And it'll even go crazy beyond that. So,
yep. It's so funny that you say that too, because of last year, like you said, nobody bats 1,000. Shit, I don't even know if I batted 300. You know, I was closer to the Mendoza line probably last year on you know the takes and the flag plants and all of that stuff. I mean, we could go down the list of the Trey Lances and the Robbie Andersons and all that. It was not very good, but ironically, the take that I was like that I would give again. I'm actually going to write an article that is like founded around this person. I'm happy to attach my brand to this.
Trey Lance.
Close. I am drafting Trey Lance again. Let's not do that. Let's not. I don't want to talk about Trey Lance anymore. Every time Rob Coakley, who does Spike Week shows for us now, he will not do a show without making fun of me about Trey Lance. So I think he's fired.
Sorry to fill that shoe today.
Yeah, I think he's fired, and I think you're not welcome on these shows anymore. No, but what I was gonna say was Darrington Evans, who obviously from a practical sense didn't help you with shit. He basically didn't play all year, right? But people saw that the logic, everything revolving around me like touting this kid who was not being drafted in best ball drafts for months. And finally, you know, I dig into these things and I'm like, this is like the best pick. Like he should be like a 15th round pick, not an 18th round pick. And like, obviously then I kind of made it a bit, but like, I would go to bat for that. The logic behind that, obviously, whether it works out or not, but like people don't hold that against you. But like, if you, like you said, if you just like present and say, hey, I think the Heat are favored by 7 tonight, they should be favored by 9. So bet -7. It's like, that doesn't, that doesn't really hold a lot of weight or whatever. But this, like, look, I'm presenting to you, I'm putting my brand on this guy, and here's all the reasons why I think we should invest in this kid. And it doesn't work out. People are like, well, I don't know. The logic was sound. It's just football,
Right. Yeah. I'm with you.
So future. Now we got future of best ball. What do you? You don't have to. If you have insider information, we don't need to be doing.
No.
What we just launched for everyone that's living under a rock, the biggest best ball contest of in the history, and the biggest fantasy season long. Anything non DFS related. It might even be the biggest fantasy sports contest ever. I don't know what the biggest live final is that DraftKings has had, but it's at least close to rivaling that. One of the biggest fantasy sports contests ever. $10 million prize pool, $2 million to first place. 3 separate millionaires will be crowned.
Shout out later Justin Herzig. God, what a year to win it.
Yeah, what a loser, Herzig. Jeez. Wait,
we're making like 10 Justin Herzigs out there this year. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, exactly. When I finished 11th and I make more money than Herzig did winning the first year, I'm gonna fly out there and give him to.
Just kidding.
Yeah, obviously. We're kidding.
Eric, to me, what puts it on perspective is the first 12 hours of Best Ball Mania 3 had more entries than the largest day ever last summer for Best Ball Mania 2. And that, like, really as a company, it's been so much fun just jumping from like a media conglomerate, like I talked about, to something that it feels like everything that we're doing has like some real, like, tangible impact. Like you can see and feel what we're all doing at the end of the week or the month or the day. Right. And that's a lot of fun. It's not just like you're on the wheel, like the hamster wheel, and like you're replaceable. Maybe we are, but I'd like to think that we're not.
I definitely would not. I definitely would not say that all the, I don't know everybody at Underdog, but from everybody that I've met, and obviously with you and Hayden, it's a big part. I really do believe that it's a really big part because of what you said, the community aspect. And we like, this isn't sports betting where everybody grew up with this thing. We need to build out this community in order for everybody to, I think, really invest in it. And I mean, Jesus, I'm just pulling it up right now. There's 7,626 entrants into Best Ball Mania 3, and it is May 4th at dinner time. Like that's pretty bananas.
Crazy. It's like it's what, 32 hours, something like that since. Okay. And I was employee 16 at Underdog, and now we're over 100. So like the whole thing is scaling. Not just scaling these tournaments, and Nick and Lars and everyone does such a great job of figuring out like the right sizing. That's a tough job, and they've done an incredible job with it. But at the same time, not just getting that correct, but it's also the marketing end and I mean, Liz and Mackins and Berm and Zach and all those people, and we're under the marketing wing too. So not only just scaling the games, scaling the marketing, where randomly I was asked to go do TV commercials in our uh, office in Brooklyn. And so we put up like a blue screen and started filming those. And then they went out like television the next week. And then they were on, this past weekend for the NFL draft. It's pretty crazy that that stuff happens and how quickly things move and what we're doing. But it's then now scaling the media side. So, we got Wob with the NBA stuff. Go and check out his channel. We got Tyler doing 3 hours a day, 5 days a week on the True Weather Show. And that's barely sports. Today they talked about the Chappelle Show and the person getting tackled on there, and I mean it's great. We're trying to figure out how to scale the media end of all that too, while still trying to give informative football content. So it's a challenge on a daily basis, but in a good way, in a good way, not a frustrating challenge, but just like there's constantly stuff to do. But I'm really enjoying it.
What do you think? Next year's Best Ball Mania 4 prize pool is going to be, if Josh Norris had to make a bet, set an over under of what the prize pool would be next year.
So this one was 10
million.
3.5. Shout out to Paul though. Shout out to Paul in the chat saying the UD customer service is unmatched. I think that's such like a big part of where we're going in this space, not just like if we can include Underdog with obviously the fantasy aspects of FanDuel and DraftKings, like all these places. To me, when you have an issue with what your money, let's put it that way, your money, you want to speak to someone like a legit person and not just get a, auto-generated email back and saying, hey, well, we've recognized the problem. So the support group is incredible for what they do, and there's just constantly things coming in with that. So shout out.
I'm not trying to throw shade at you, Josh, but it might be the best part of the company.
It really might be.
It's not a slide on you. It's actually not a slide on you. I think it's that good.
And I think it has to be, and especially like they have to deal with fraud too and all that type of stuff. Like there's a lot to do on that end, and it's amazing how
it's also more difficult to deal with customer service and, like you said, the fraud and the issues of any
people
conspiracy,
just making up stuff.
Yeah, I mean, and it's harder to implement, right? So like you and I hop into a draft together, and we're gonna scheme, right? It's not easy for anyone to determine if you are where you are and I'm where I am. We're not in the same IP. We're not even in the same freaking state. We're not in the same time zone. So like we could do whatever we want to do, and figuring out how to handle all of that and doing it really well, and like no one complains because it's done so well and the service is so good.
Right.
I think it flies under the radar, and it shouldn't.
Yeah, I'm with you. And the other part of scaling too is just getting people to try it for the first time. Like best ball is one of those things. It's like football Pringles, where like once you try it once, you want to keep going, but they hear best ball and they don't know what it is. And they might hear it a second time and a third time. How many times they have to hear it, or like, what is the pitch to get them to try it one time, to download the app and get into one draft? Because I think you can say this, and I'm sure the entire chat can. Once you do one draft, you want to do another draft. And I don't mean that from like hey, it is a good thing for me if you draft as many times as possible. It's just fun. Yep. It's fun. And I think we need to get rid of this at large, assumption that, fantasy football is just that one draft that you do with friends in the end of August or early September, which, I mean, that's always going to be there. But
and it should
draft right now, and it should be 100%.
There.
But you can draft right now to prepare for that instead of these phony mock drafts. And you don't have to manage on a weekly basis. It's all just the drafting part, which people prepare for more than anything else until they give up, in week 9. So figuring out all of that. And I think we've done an incredible job in just a year doing that. And again, it speaks to the comment I started with, where we had more entries in the first 12 hours than we did of any big day last year, which was Labor Day, I think was our biggest entry point last year.
And wait till Labor Day this year. I mean, Good Lord, man, it's going to be absolutely crazy. as we wrap up, you kind of reminded me, as we're kind of talking about the future of best ball and everything. What got me, and I've told this story before. I don't know if I've told you, so I'm going to tell it again. Apologize to the people that have heard it. What got me truly hooked. So I played best ball back to the really
MFL
just
10s.
I did a little bit of MFL 10 stuff. The experience wasn't, that's another thing. The Underdog, the product
and
team
MFL
is,
10s wasn't tournaments. It was just like
Right.
a private draft that you put out. Evan got me into those because when back in the old days of the podcast, he would mention like, oh, and over an MFL 10. So I was like, what the hell is this? And then the payouts there were crazy in that, like, if you
Yes.
won, you get $100 if they were $10 entries, right? MFL 10s.
Yep.
And so in my brain, I'm like, I only have to win 1 out of every 10 times to break even. And if I win, 5 more than that, boom, there's $500 in my pocket. And I loved MFL 10.
See, my problem was coming from the DFS side of things. It was like the juice wasn't worth the squeeze.
Got it.
For just the, like.
And those were all slow drafts. Those were all slow drafts.
Exactly. And so the experience wasn't as good. The product was great, actually, but the experience wasn't as good with those. And there's no upside. And so I think that's important, right? I'm not saying you have to have $10 million worth of upside, but you have to have some kind of upside. Right. If I'm going to draft in May, there needs to be like a real payoff at the end, not 10xing $10. So I did some MFL 10s. And I really got into it in the draft, draft.com with Jeremy. That was when I really dove in really heavy. I somehow won. I didn't make any crazy big money, but had a solid season despite 2 of my stands being Justice Hill, and Dante Pettis. So I clearly have a 49ers issue, but
sure. I'm surprised it wasn't Darwin Thompson.
No, I left that one for Davis.
Got it.
Darwin got the Chiefs theme, which I guess I Justice Hill also got this theme. So Darwin was the 18th round pick that was going in like the 8th round by the end of draft. That was nuts. So I got into it then, and obviously got into Underdog the very first year. Loved it, but it never truly clicked for me. Like, holy shit, this is like. I'm literally not surprised by what, like, the $10 million thing. Like, I'm actually not surprised because I've been a believer now for 2 years or whatever that like this is the absolute future of fantasy sports, period. But it was what hooked me. NBA playoff, best ball tournaments on Underdog, because you talked about fun, and like the part of the fun for me is how the strategy of all of it. Right. And like going in and having to think through, okay, there's only 16 teams that make the playoffs, but I'm only drafting 10 players. How do how many players can I actually draft? Like stacking, right? Everybody kind of understands that, but like how many? Because like they're playing series. Like this isn't even just like the NFL playoffs. There's 7-game series. You could draft both teams that make the finals, but if they sweep everybody along the way, it doesn't matter, right? And so like this balancing act of all these different variables of a game it's definitely unsolvable, but it was clearly unsolvable when we were first learning about it. And I was just hooked. I'm just sitting on my phone, just constantly drafting teams because I'm like, well, what about this scenario? Exactly your example. You finish one and you're like, well, what about this? What if the Celtics win? What if the Celtics sweep? I'm like, I really like the Celtics, but what if they? So all of that.
Isn't there something to it being unsolvable though? Like during
Yes.
my fun, like I was at Rotoworld when there was the crazy growth of DFS with FanDuel and DraftKings and all that type of stuff. And obviously I would play cash each week and do tournaments and that type of stuff. But then it got to a point when, you're basically playing 1v1s or 2v2s. And, there are some very patient, smarter, more intelligent people out there than I am that just are totally cool with doing a whole bunch of $50, $10, $20, whatever entries and playing 1v1s and 2v2s and just like slowly building it up. That doesn't really get my juices flowing,
Right.
And people are still out there doing that. That's amazing. But I kind of love on some level that what we are doing is like totally unsolvable. Not just the playoffs that you mentioned in both NBA and NFL, but like drafting every summer. It's like we just have conversations that carries us through the entire summer because we're trying to figure this out, And I really do feel that we are also, because there's so much great content out there, a lot of it, no matter what, is geared towards, because of the biggest audience, your home leagues that are probably PPR format, right? And I really feel that best ball half point PPR should be, configured in your brain, thought about, processed a bit differently than managed full point
Definitely.
PPR. And I don't know if we're like at the point yet, and maybe it is this summer when we are like just talking about strategies specific to half point PPR best ball versus like lumping them all together. But that's also difficult because then, people who create content can't do like two separate shows about the two different platforms or the two separate styles. So it's, I'm enjoying it. And I think the uncertainty of the whole thing is really does help us in the end.
Yeah, 100%. The uncertainty. I mean, the uncertainty is everything. The uncertainty
In a fun way, though, not like
it's not like I'm trying to think of an example of like uncertain. Honestly, like USFL is going on right now. If anybody got into like the DFS streets of, I did not, but I know obviously people who did, and it's like you literally don't even know who's playing,
right?
Nonetheless, who's getting the ball. Right, like sometimes this quarterback plays, sometimes this one does, and there's no rhyme or reason. Right, there's guys that are on the inactive list getting 25 carries in a game, so like that level of uncertainty isn't good for anybody. But the amount of uncertainty that exists in this game is great for everybody because yes, sometimes you're going to come out on the bad end, sometimes you're going to come out on the good end, right? And that uncertainty creates strategy and creates opportunity, and so. I couldn't possibly be more excited for it. Now, before we wrap up, because that uncertainty had me thinking of the last thing I was going to ask you. This specific 2022 NFL season, this off season, like you want to talk about creating uncertainty. Have we ever seen this much movement in an NFL offseason that changed, right? That changed the entire NFL landscape. Tyreek Hill, right. Devontae Adams, Russell Wilson, on down the list. AJ Brown just recently. What is your like grand takeaway for like if you had to put a theme or like or a prediction, or what are you thinking about heading into like right now? Obviously it's early, but like after the draft, what were you like? Oh my God, like this is what I think the season's going to be like.
I think it's really easy to start talking yourself and believing into like the player that is going to outperform the bad team that he's on. And it absolutely happens. Like the Brandon Cookses of the world, Amon-Ra St. Browns, like there's a whole bunch of different ways production can happen. And in fact, like thinking back last year to DeAndre Swift and how he was exploding week after week, so many of that was in like the second half of the third quarter. And then the fourth quarter when they were down by like 20 something points and he creates, a 60-yard touchdown in the passing game. So like, how much of that production that he created early on last season when he was having those 20 something point weeks is replaceable, like is replicable, repeatable when they might be more competitive this year, So even getting into those nuances of game flow and game script and what the production was in those versus, how these teams might change. Yeah. I mean, to answer your question, I don't know if I have a really good answer because ADPs are still being set right now, like
it's crazy. The opinions are all over the place.
Right. Like Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle are still being drafted as like top 12 wide receivers, the one player who stands out to me, if we can just like be really specific in this.
Yep.
If we expect Deshaun Watson to miss, 4, 6, 8 games, the Cleveland Browns are also a team that as of this moment have too much invested in the running back spot for how they run their organization.
Mm-hmm.
Kareem Hunt's contract, no guaranteed money left.
Yep.
I wouldn't be surprised if it's a free cut or a trade or something that happens. Maybe they keep him. Who knows? But of course, I have to come on your show and talk about the running back 10. But there is an avenue where, to me, Nick Chubb in the first half of the season like leads the league in carries. And I don't know if it's factoring in like Alvin Kamara is going as running back 8. At the very least, I think we need to flip him and Nick Chubb. And I think Nick Chubb, we always talk about this because he splits backfields and yada, yada, yada. But I think there's a major difference between, and this is hypothetical at this point, Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt versus Nick Chubb and Dearness Johnson. And the latter, I think, is what we will be getting. And I mean, talk about big plays plus volume, plus a healthy offensive line compared to last year. And I'm would hate to miss up an opportunity where I advocate for you taking a running back who's going in like round 2.
So you gave me the opportunity to pull up. You will be surprised as a running back hater, and particularly a running back hater who does not catch passes traditionally. I'm fairly in on Nick Chubb. I know you said he's going at running back 10, and he is currently my running back 10. I have a couple of I'm very high on Saquon and Javonte.
You are. He's at running back 13. Saquon is an underdog right now.
In particular, we don't need to get into my whole rankings process, but I try to take very large stands on the guys.
Yeah, I love these James Conner and Leonard Fournette. Well, you don't have Leonard Fournette up there, but I love the James Conner.
Yeah, he's right here. So 12, RB12.
Yeah.
So, but same if you wanted same Fournette, same thing. If you wanted to move him up, I'm pretty aggressive on the running back stuff. The wide receiver stuff, I'm so on. But I think you talked about the half point PPR thing. That's something I'm definitely making sure that I try to embrace a little bit more, and thinking through some of those contingencies, like you said, with Kareem Hunt being gone. Even when Kareem Hunt was hurt last year, they didn't specifically use Chubb in like quite the role that I was kind of hoping for, because I did invest a little bit into him just to kind of cover my ass on what I thought was maybe a bad take.
I think he was also coming off injury too, if I'm remembering correctly.
And I just think tying ourselves too much to little things that happened in the past can get us into trouble. When like Nick Chubb is maybe the best pure runner in football. He's the most efficient runner in football. Like, let's just not. I don't want to leave with 0% Nick Chubb. I feel like that would be foolish. Right. Is basically,
especially a team that like wants to use so many tight ends and different personnel groupings, and like literally it's Amari Cooper and David Bell at wide receiver at this moment, and like that's all that we're talking about. I talk myself into it every year, but I think there's a real avenue for, again, a top 5 start to the season for Nick Chubb. So
can I get a cosign on David Bell then? What about David Bell? Are you a David Bell guy as a prospect?
They're going to play him in the slot. And again, what the Browns, the deal that they made for Amari Cooper, like immediately 24 hours later, looked like a bargain in comparison to what all these other wide receivers are getting paid, and how much they had to give up, like what, a 5th round pick to get him.
Yep.
And look, there's still these veterans that are moving, and maybe one lands there and hopefully one does. But yeah, I mean, if he shows anything, David Bell should be a starter on that team.
Well, let's hope, because my current, it's not a ton of money yet, but it's going to be a lot of money because I'm not going to stop drafting him.
I hope you're drafting a lot of James Conner right now, because he's going as running back 18 on Underdog, and you have him as like running back 8. I think I saw.
Yes, that's correct. James Conner is one of my guys. We talked about Saquon, Javonte. I'm about close to the market with Fournette, which is like, isn't this wild? Last year, like we would have, like I would have thrown up of me saying these things, right? Like all these running backs, Saquon Barkley on the Giants with Daniel Jones as his quarterback, like you're going to be overweight on him. Like Leonard Fournette, you weren't drafting him in the 14th round, and he's your running back 12. What are we doing here? You know,
changes quickly.
It does. It changes quickly. So last prediction, one more prediction. The winning stack. What?
Oh,
if you had to pick. So last year it was Joe Burrow to Jamar Chase.
Yeah, but let me tell you this. If we're talking regular season, which now
you can do both.
Gives you $1 million. The regular season last year winner stacked the hell out of the Bucks. Like multiple rounds early selected Buccaneers players. So that's something to keep in mind, that now
we're all of them,
that.
Right?
Well,
Brady,
he drafted like
Evans,
Gronk about 3 rounds early, and Fournette about 3 rounds early, like literally 3 rounds. And they dominated the regular season. So
not rushing, Casey. Casey says basically Eric is saying Saquon lead the league in rushing. No, but I'm buying Brian Daboll, and I'm buying Saquon health and all that fun stuff.
I think if you wanted to, God, and that's a bit different. I mean, stacking the Chiefs right now is pretty easy if you eliminate Travis Kelce from your brain.
Which wide receiver then?
Yeah, well, we don't have to decide anymore between Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill in round one, which is a big conversation in previous years. I mean, you could easily get Mahomes as the quarterback too, and we're going to have a conversation all summer long about taking quarterbacks earlier now versus our brains and season long leagues of what we could replace week on week. Juju's wide receiver 37, which is really early in comparison to like MVS at wide receiver 57 and Sky Moore at wide receiver 52. You could easily get all three of those players plus Patrick Mahomes and roll from there. So if you want to sprinkle in a CEH at running back 28 versus where he was like running back 12 or 13 last year.
Yep.
That's just an offense that I think, if we remember the second half of last season, learned how to attack those two high shells.
Yep.
But on top of that, Patrick Mahomes was still top 3 in the league in terms of 20+ yard passing attempts. So while they probably even set themselves up better this year to attack the spacing underneath that defense is going to give them in the passing game, Mahomes is still going to launch it down the field and create big plays doing that outside of structure and inside of structure too. So going through this growing pains last year, I think is going to pay off in like the diversity that we get in their wide receiver room this year. And it's already at a discount that we can get all 4 of those pieces if we wanted to, and basically every single draft that we're doing right
now. I love that take. I love both you and Hayden's take about MVS. I couldn't possibly agree more. He's right there with, in terms of undervalued guys, him. David Bell was another one of my.
And here's a comment on that, because we still, no matter what, get comments about MVS, and I think part of it is because he drops the ball on Monday Night Football, for a 60-yard touchdown, all that stuff. He'll give you zeros. Guess what? It's best ball. He'll give you 4 20-point weeks that help you win that week and are points on the board, instead of 10 7.5 to 8.5 point weeks that maybe will give you like a little bit of floor on 1 or 2 of those. I'd much rather have those 4 to 5 to maybe even 6, and who knows what he's going to be like with Patrick Mahomes on those 20-yard or 20-point games, because we've seen him in the past. So that's where I'm at, and he's already climbed 3 wide receiver spots in 24 hours. So he's
going to keep climbing, and I think he should. The MVS is a perfect example of a guy. I think people get take locked on because of what they've seen from him. Like, the perfect example, right? He drops a 60-yard touchdown. We remember that. Rodgers is pissed, right? It's Monday Night Football. MVS drops an easy touchdown. Rodgers throws the chin strap down, is motherfucking him under his breath, and we all see that. And then he won't throw to him then, because Rodgers is Rodgers. Now he's not going to throw to that guy. Devontae Adams going to get the next 12 targets, and it is what it is. But like, there's a skill in earning that 60 that target, and Patrick Mahomes is not going to go away from him.
Right.
If Patrick Mahomes, if anything, he's going to go back to him more maybe than he should, because that's how he plays.
Look at the money. They gave him like $25 million. Like, this isn't just some like scrub that they just added at the end of free agency. Like, this is a critical piece to them, that they like separated the things of what Tyreek can do and put it in multiple wide receivers. And like, they have built, a wide receiver room that have different traits now. So I'm going to talk about this a lot this summer, but yeah, that is definitely one that I'm throwing out there. So
any other ones that have stuck out to you in the first 2 days?
Allen Robinson, where he's going, I tweeted this out. He's going as wide receiver 34. If you remember what Odell did last year, he had 12 targets, 8 receptions, and 8 touchdowns inside the 10-yard line. That was where he made the difference for the Rams, because Cooper Kupp gets doubled, or at least shaded. Tyler Higbee was one like the least efficient players inside on his red zone targets in the league. And they had trouble, running the ball and doing those quarterback sneaks with Matthew Stafford. That like the difference that Odell made in playing big and small and isolated coverage near the goal line. By the way, the Rams throw almost more than anyone else other than like Tom Brady inside the goal line, or inside the 10-yard line, I should say. So Allen Robinson, I think, is going to have the most touchdowns of his career since 2015. He had 14 that season, but ever since then, it's been like 6 or 8 or 0 or wherever else we are in between there. And so double-digit touchdowns for Allen Robinson that you can get at wide receiver 34. I don't love how he played last year. I thought he was like lethargic and slow and molasses and all that stuff. But that is the key area that the Rams are missing in their offense this year, is like the guy who makes 4-point plays, turning field goals into touchdowns. And I think Allen Robinson is the best bet to do that in the team.
Just need him to pull a James Harden, getting his way out of Houston. Not current James Harden, because current James Harden sucks. But James Harden is mad in Houston. Allen Robinson was mad in Chicago. And then all of a sudden, guess what? He gets recruited by Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving to come play for the Brooklyn Nets. Allen Robinson is now with Matthew Stafford and McVay and Cooper Kupp and all these guys. It's like, I'm not going to be playing lethargic anymore on the Super Bowl champs with all these guys. So.
Some might say it can't get any worse. That's what we call the AJ Green.
You had to get a goddamn AJ Green reference.
I mean,
before we got
he had usable weeks as a round 18 selection last year.
I know. I know. I'm not showing. Okay, Casey. This is how I know we've gone too long, and it's time when two Atwell references are coming in, and AJ Green references are coming in. But Josh, thank you. This was a lot of fun. I got to nerd out selfishly because I was huge into all the stuff that you talked about and got to experience, obviously, that I've not, I was certainly not in any draft rooms, but that was a huge part of my, growing up in football. And I think part of what makes this whole best ball space really fun is, I joke about it and other people joke about it. We'll talk about it plenty over the next few months with player takes and all that kind of stuff, but that's what makes it fun. You're not here to like be excited about a player, whether it's because you like him because of film or analytics or whatever, what's even the point? You probably should just find another hobby. So this was a lot of fun for me. Anything that you guys have coming up that you want to mention before we go?
Just again, want to shout out the team over at Underdog. Pretty special group we have. I mentioned support, awesome. Marketing, awesome. On like sizing, they're great. Engineering side does such a good job of making it flow and be easy to use and all that jazz. And then, the design group, where brought in Luke Lovett, who I actually went to college with, and he's making all the video animations and all that type of stuff that you see, plus Katie and Kathleen on that end. So just shout out to everyone on the team, because Hayden and I get to be the lucky ones to talk about it and kind of be the front facing stuff, but then everyone in the back end makes it all churn and do really well. So we couldn't do it without them.
100%. Perfect way to sign it off. I will be back tomorrow. I already forget what time, but it's on the website, spikeweek.com. Media schedule is in the upper right. I'll be back tomorrow. Josh and Hayden are back tomorrow at some point, I believe,
3 o'clock Eastern.
3 o'clock NFC offenses from the draft. Yep. Or NFC teams from the draft. And then I'll be back in the draft stream streets on Friday. That's Mondays and Fridays for me. So until next time, you probably already follow Josh. You probably already go to watch Underdog Show. But if you don't, see them tomorrow, and then I will see you guys tomorrow too. Later.